New Year and welcome you to the January 27th, 2021 meeting of the Transportation Access Advisory Committee. Before we begin, Reagan Lively, our RTC liaison, will do a roll call, give us a list of staff who are on the phone call, and we'll also do some housekeeping things. So Reagan, if you go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as a reminder to everyone, we are recording and live streaming the meeting on YouTube. Please independently mute and unmute your line as needed, especially during roll call vote and discussion. I will be monitoring lines and muting everyone with background noise. Please refrain from using the WebEx chat feature to everyone, as that will be broadcast on the live stream. However, if you have any challenges during the meeting, please feel free to send me a message directly. We'll begin the meeting in 3, 2, 1. Thank you for joining the RTC's Transportation Access Advisory Committee meeting. Chair Payton, staff is ready for you to begin.
Good afternoon. For the record, this is Jean, and I'm here to welcome you to the January 27th, 2021 meeting of the Transportation Access Advisory Committee, and to also say Happy New Year to all of you. Before we begin the meeting, Reagan Lively, our RTC liaison, will do the roll call, give us a list of staff who are on the call, and go over a few housekeeping rules. So Reagan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Reagan Lively, Management Analyst for the RTC, for the record. I will be calling your name in alphabetical order. Please confirm your attendance as I read your name. Evander Davis?
Aye.
Raymond Fletcher? Raymond Fletcher?
Here.
Janai Gassion?
Present.
Dan Hyde?
Here.
Beth Elogan? Oh, Beth, I believe you are muted.
Here.
Thank you, Beth. Chuck Newhoner?
Present.
Jean Payton?
Present.
And Amanda Shipp?
Here.
Thank you. Also, please note that we have several RTC staff on the line for today's meeting. This includes Dan Howland, Director of Paratransit and Specialized Services, Mr. Sherwin Gutierrez, Director of Finance, Mr. Bridge Gulati, Director of Capital Projects, Ms. Antoinette Braddock, Manager of Paratransit Operations and Specialized Services, Mr. Jim Champeau, Transit Mobility Program Supervisor, and Kenny Rodriguez, Customer Care Manager. As the chair mentioned, I have a few housekeeping items to go over. When the chair asks for comments from the committee or calls for a vote, please remember to unmute yourself before speaking. Remember to state your name for the record before providing comment. Be sure to mute your line if you are not speaking. Voting will be done verbally. The chair will call for ayes and nays. If there are no nays, then the motion will carry. If there are nays, then a roll call vote will be required. In the event of a roll call vote, please wait for your name to be read to provide your vote. The chair will call for any comments or questions after an item has been presented. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Reagan. And before we start our first item on the agenda, which is public comment, Dan Howland will present to us the reasons for this new way of doing public comments. So Dan, if you would go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Dan Howland, Director of Paratransit and Specialized Services, for the record. As you know, on March 22nd, 2020, the State of Nevada Executive Department issued Declaration of Emergency Directive 006, which suspended the requirement to have a physical location for public meetings. Pursuant to Directive 006 and for the health and safety of the community, this meeting is being held telephonically. For the first citizens participation period, Ms. Reagan Lively will read the public comments received by the RTC. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dan. So the first public comment, to begin with, the comments need to be concerning items on today's agenda for this first session. The comments need to have been submitted in writing by email or on the website to the RTC. Any comments, they will be read. The first 500 of each comment will be read. However, the entire comment will be included in the minutes of this meeting. And now, Reagan, are there any comments that were submitted regarding the first part of regarding the agenda?
Thank you, Chairwoman Payton. Reagan Lively, Management Analyst for the RTC, for the record. There are no public comments at this time.
Okay, thank you. So item 3 on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the November 18th, 2020 meeting. I'll entertain a motion to accept.
Madam Chair, this is Dan Hyde. I move that we approve the minutes as submitted.
Thank you, Dan. All in favor of accepting the minutes as submitted, say aye.
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 Are there any nays? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Thank you. Items 3 and 4 are the consent agenda, and these are items that if you have anything that you would like to discuss that falls within one of those two numbers, you would need to remove it from the consent agenda so we could discuss the item. Is there anyone interested in removing something from one of the two agenda items on the consent agenda?
Madam Chair, Raymond Fletcher for the record. Can I make can I say something about the minutes before we move forward on this?
Yeah. Why don't, well, actually, let us take the vote on this, Raymond, and come back to your thing on the minutes, okay? I promise.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so does anyone want to remove something from the consent agenda? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Madam Chair, this is Dan Hyde, so moved.
Thank you, Dan. All in favor of removing approving the consent agenda, say aye.
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 Opposed? Nay? Okay, the consent agenda is approved. We'll go back for a second. And Raymond, what was your thing about the minutes, please?
Madam Chair, Raymond Fletcher for the record. What I noticed when I was reviewing the minutes for this meeting was oftentimes there are points where individuals bring up items throughout the meeting and there's discussion and we hear that there will be follow-up from the staff on it. There are things that I have not been followed up on, and I was thinking maybe there's some way we can get some sort of tracker or something going to keep track to make sure that the issues we, the members of this committee, bring up can either follow up on or come back to and make sure that we get a response or a resolution.
Okay. Is there a member of the staff that would like to respond to that request of Raymond's?
Madam Chair, Dan Howland, Director of Paratransit for the record. I'm happy to respond. I will follow up with Mr. Fletcher in regards to the specifics, and we will report back into the next meeting in March with a solution if needed.
Okay. Does that work, Raymond?
Madam Chair, Raymond Fletcher for the record. Yeah, it does, but unfortunately, as time passes, I personally, I forget what I talked about in November or a few months back. And as I said, having looked through the minutes and seeing so-and-so will follow up with this person, so-and-so would follow up with that person. I'm curious on what the resolution is when we have dialogue or discussion on issues. You know, for example, with the 2050 plan, one of the things that I had brought up was the changes in what's going on with COVID, the decrease in revenue we as a state are receiving, and all the changes going on. You know, example being the people mover with the boring company. Someone was supposed to follow up with me, and that wasn't followed up on. Meanwhile, meetings are being had at the executive level, at the county, at the board of commissioners level, whereas there was no follow-up, there was no feedback, there was nothing that was done, and then the decisions are being made. So when we come back in January or March, how can we go back and put the toothpaste back in the bottle when it was already approved or moved on from? That's the really frustrating part for me.
You know, Madam Chair, Dan Howland for the record, as stated.
Yes, Dan.
I will follow up with Mr. Fletcher immediately after this meeting ends, get more specifics, and we'll report back to this committee in March as to the findings.
Okay. Thank you. Dan, at one point in our agendas, there used to be a page that said unresolved issues or concerns or something. I haven't seen it in a number of months. And I'm wondering if maybe that could be reinstituted so that things that come up in meetings can go on to that list.
That's
as
an
part of the resolution.
Excellent suggestion, Madam Chair. I'll look into that immediately.
Okay, thank
Madam
you.
Chair, Beth
Yes.
Logan for the record. I think my suggestion is, aside from going back to whoever the person is that have pending questions, let's put like a target time or date, like maybe within a week's time from the meeting, so that it's going to be like more of an urgent need to respond back to the person. Or maybe there could be a list of pending items, within the meeting minutes that needs action. Just a suggestion.
Oh, thank you, Beth. I think the form that I was mentioning to Dan is kind of what you're talking about, a pending items form. So hopefully we'll see something that gets these a little more organized for us. So thank you. Any other comments before we move forward? Okay, then the item number 5 is an update on the web-based and mobile technology products that are to be rolled out to paratransit users sometime during the first quarter of 2021. And that would be given by Antoinette Braddock. Antoinette?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. For the record, my name is Antoinette Braddock, Manager of Paratransit and Specialized Services for the RTC. And today I'm just coming to you with an update on this program, but just as a reminder, the MyRTC is a web and app technology that we are working to roll out initially, which will be a pilot, and then big picture to all of our paratransit customers. And this technology will provide a more user-friendly, more efficient, and more consistent feature or technology option for our paratransit customers, similar to what some of our other public transit riders experience through FixRoute. So as previously noted, we are working on the final development of the products, and we will subsequently be rolling out a small pilot. And what we're looking at right now is going to be a split pilot. So we're initially going to roll out the web version of this technology to a small group, and we anticipate that that will be done within the next couple months. And then we will follow that up with a pilot on the app, which will be done shortly after that. Currently, we are experiencing a little bit of delays with some of the development, and that's on the technical side of it with the with Trapeze, who is the technology provider. Nothing abnormal or unusual. The holidays just got some of the items that we needed to resolve caught up in their queues. So they're working through those very quickly. And like I said, we anticipate that we'll be rolling out the pilot for the web portion of the scheduling in the next couple months. So I'll leave it there. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. If not, we'll be back in the months to come. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Antoinette? Okay, hearing none. Thank you,
Chair.
Antoinette. Oh, Raymond.
Raymond Fletcher for the record. Antoinette, at the previous meeting, you had said that this would be rolled out by March. Are you looking later in the year then? After the first quarter?
So great question, Mr. Fletcher. So thanks for that. What we are looking at for the web portion is so full steam. We will definitely be rolling that out after the first quarter. The pilot, we will, like I said, we'll be doing the web portion of the pilot sooner, which will be done. I would anticipate end of February, beginning of March. Again, there's a couple technical things that Trapeze is trying to flesh out. And then the app piece, we will likely get that probably at the very end of the first quarter or the beginning of the second quarter. It's like I said, a couple of these technology pieces have been caught up on the technical developer side, and the holidays had a lot to do with that. So, into first quarter for the first part of the pilot, beginning of the second quarter for the second part of the pilot. It's kind of a slow roll, right? It's like a lovely painting that we're trying to get all perfection and put together, and a nice little package for when we do roll it out as a whole.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Madam Chair, Evander Davis for the record.
Yes, Evander.
Will you be getting members of the board or the committee to participate in the pilot?
Another excellent question, Mr. Davis. So what we are looking at, Tanya Thomas, who is our supervisor of quality assurance under Paratransit, is actually working to look at who our pilot participants might be, and some good pilot participants. We want to do this very similar to what we did with our Ride on Demand. So we want to ensure that we have segments of our paratransit customer base, right? So we want to look for folks who may have visual impairments. We might want to look for folks who utilize, who need the accessible vehicle with a lift, so that we can test all of the functionality within the technology to make sure that everything that they're able to do online and via their smartphone is all of the same stuff and works correctly, the same way you would if you called into our call center. So with that said, if there are interested members of the committee or otherwise, they can express interest, and they'll be strongly considered. But we do, again, we want our pilot group to be a really nice kind of sampling of our whole paratransit customer base. So I'm not sure if that answered your question fully, but if not, I'd happy to expand.
No, that'll be good. Just make sure you tell her that I express my willingness to participate.
Very good. I will definitely share that information, and we'll keep that in mind. So thank you for offering and for stepping up to the plate to participate.
No
Madam
problem.
Chair, this is Betty Logan for the record. I have a question to
Yes,
Antoinette. Okay, Antoinette,
Go ahead.
is there certain target number of sample of people that are going to be in the survey or in
Another
the
good
pilot
question.
project?
Yeah, so another great question. So we want to do it very similar to what we did with our Ride on Demand pilot. And the reason for that is because we felt like the small pilot base that we had was very effective. We selected some really great individuals that provided some constructive and useful feedback. And so we'll do it very much the same. So it'll be, I like to call it a slow roll. So we're just going to get, a handful of customers to start. And this methodology allows our team to really have a very hands-on approach with the customers that are using it. So we can be really agile, right? So as they tell us or identify problems, we can work with them directly and work with our technology partner, Trapeze, directly to fix those issues. If we have a really big pilot, we don't have the benefit of that hands-on approach. So I don't have a number, but it will be a small group of folks to start.
Thank you, Antoinette.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Antoinette? Okay, thank you very much, Antoinette. We'll hope that in March we'll hear that it's rolling out already. That'll be nice. All right, number 6 on the agenda is an update on the paratransit path of travel conditional eligibility, and that will be given by Jim Champeau. So Jim?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Jim Champeau, Transit Mobility Program Supervisor for the record. I'm here today to give an update on our Path of Travel conditional eligibility process. I'm going to start with a little bit of a recap, just to for those people that were maybe not part of the meeting last time, so that they can get up to speed with what this process is. So first slide, please. What is Path of Travel? The Path of Travel, or POT, is the process of determining whether or not a person has a barrier-free path of travel to and from a location which they are traveling to. Physical barriers can include, but are not limited to, missing or broken sidewalks, light poles, fire hydrants, steep grades, construction, vegetation, or missing curb cuts. Next slide, please. A little bit on how we got here. So in 2018, the Federal Transit Administration, or the FTA, conducted an audit on the RTC Paratransit Certification Department. Included in their final report was a recommendation that RTC make customers using power or manual mobility devices at least conditionally eligible for ADA paratransit service for path of travel barriers. A customer is granted POT conditional eligibility in and of itself would have been denied paratransit services prior to the FTA final report because they exhibited the functional ability to utilize fixed route transit during their assessment. Next slide, please. So the RTC's goal with this was to ensure through its path of travel process that customers will be able to use the mode of transportation that is most appropriate for their condition. The RTC's fixed route fleet is 100% accessible to people with disabilities. Having access to all modes of transportation promotes inclusivity throughout the community. And due to the FTA's findings, the RTC needed to look at ways to offset additional costs. Next slide, please. So what has been done to date? So at the beginning of October, 368 letters were mailed out to customers who had the conditional type of path of travel. So that is the only condition that they had, was just POT. Of that 368, 12 customers' trips were identified in November and December as trips that had no barriers as part of our path of travel eligibility process. So of those 12 customers, there were 26 total trips denied to date. So that's a trip from their origin to their destination. So an origin to destination is one trip. A trip from their destination back to the origin would be considered another trip. And out of that, everybody that had trips denied had the right to appeal those decisions. And to date, we had 2 customer appeals, and one of those appeals were upheld, and the other one was overturned. So to date, that is kind of the status of what we have done since we started this path of travel eligibility process. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that any of you may have.
Madam Chair, Beth Ilagan for the record.
Yes, Beth.
I have a question. With regards to the physical barriers, do we have anything with the RTC that people, let's say somebody had a fall because of a certain barrier, do they even report to the RTC that say that they have fallen? And then does the RTC has a way to take action regarding this so that they could, make changes as needed?
Very good question. So as part of the appeal process, so say if we go out and we find there's no barriers on the trip, a person can come back to us through that appeal process and say, well, I do have a barrier and this is my barrier. So as part of that process, my staff goes out and looks individually at all of the barriers that this person is reporting that they have to see whether or not this barrier exists or whether there's a problem there that might need to be looked at. As part of this as well, we've done a mapping of all of the barriers that we have found of every single one of our fixed route transit lines here in Las Vegas during this past summer of 2020. And through that, we have started to develop partnerships with some of the different entities in which these barriers are located. So City of North Las Vegas, Clark County. So our goal is to report these barriers to the entities in which they're located to have them rectified or to have them fixed. So we are in the beginning of that process now. We have actually had a few of the barriers that we have found that we have went and contacted the local entities and they have corrected them. So this is going to be a continuing process, and our goal is to get these barriers remedied because it's good for our customers and it's also good for us.
Thank you, Jim.
Are there any other questions for Jim? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Jim. Keep us posted on what's going on. Item 7 on our agenda is a financial update of the first quarter of fiscal year 2021, and that'll be given by Sherwin Gutierrez. So Sherwin, are you ready?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Good afternoon. Sherwin John Gutierrez, Director of Finance for the record. I'm here to present a financial update for the RTC for the period of first quarter of fiscal year 2021. Next slide, please. This slide, we are doing a comparisons of recessions. In fiscal year 2008, there was a gradual decline versus a steep decline in fiscal year 2020, which we all know it's mainly due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In fiscal year 2008, it took us about 27 months to reach the lowest point at 26.8% versus 2 months in fiscal year 2020 at the low point of 35.5% decline. Decreases were less severe in the months following April 2020, as you can see on the red lines. When we were creating the final budget for fiscal year 2021, sometime in April and May of 2020, we have very little information to base our revenue projections on other than what we are seeing in the news during that time, activity on the strips and downtown. And we also work collaboratively with other financial consultants within the region. Next slide, please. We submitted our fiscal year 2021 budgets in May for a 31% decrease in sales tax for first quarter of fiscal year 2021. The actual sales tax revenue were much better than budgeted, and revenue was 9.6% down from the same period in fiscal year 2020. Next slide, please. Fiscal year 2008 recession for MVFT, or motor vehicle fuel tax revenue, was much more stable. The big decline in month 26 was an anomaly due to a large distributor not paying the tax for that month and then repaying it over time. I think that's the 28.9% you see on your screen with the green line. Fiscal year 2020 for MVFT experienced a sudden and deep decline similar to sales tax at a low point of 47.2%. And then months after that, it's still a decline, but it is similar to sales tax, much less severe than the April 2020. Next slide, please. During March, April, and May of 2020, we were closely monitoring the Nevada Fuel Distributors Association for fuel sales. Sales were about half of what was normal. In early May, we had preliminary March sales numbers that were consistent with the last half of March sales at about half from the normal levels. During that time, we didn't know if sales were going to get worse or improve. Thus, as finance, we budget conservatively. We submitted our fiscal year 21 budgets in May for a 43% decrease in motor vehicle fuel tax for the first quarter of fiscal year 2021. The actual MVFT number was much better than budgeted, and revenue was 13% down from the same period in fiscal year 2020. Next slide, please. Fuel revenue indexing is very similar to MVFT. We budgeted 43% decline, and the actual came in at 12% down from the same period in fiscal year 2020. Next slide, please. Fuel revenue indexing too is very consistent with other fuel taxes due to the comparisons with pre-COVID projections. We budgeted a 43% decline, and the actual came in at 24% higher in comparison over the same period in fiscal year 2020. This was mainly due to an indexing rate increase that occurred last July 1 of 2020. One thing to note, motor vehicle fuel tax, or MVFT, fuel revenue indexing, and fuel revenue indexing 2, these revenue sources can only be used for roadway projects for our member jurisdictions. Next slide, please. COVID-19 has taken a bigger toll on transit revenue due to decreased ridership and during the and rear door boarding in April and May for fixed route services. In fiscal year 20, the number there is a 16.6 million drop in revenue, and then for fiscal year 2021, it's about a 19 million drop in revenue, and we're actually trending that way as of mid-year. So next slide, please. Similar to sales tax and motor vehicle fuel tax revenues, ridership fell to a 57.8% decline in April and has hovered around the 50% since then. In fiscal 2008 recession, it took until month 30 to reach the lowest decline, which is only 15.9%. Next slide, please. We submitted our fiscal year 21 budgets in May for a 47% decrease in fixed route fare revenue for first quarter of fiscal year 2021. The actual fixed route fare revenue were much worse than budgeted, and revenue was 52% down over the same period in fiscal year 2020. Next slide, please. As a direct response to the COVID-19 pandemic, RTC was able to lower our actual operating expense of about 7.7 million for fiscal year 2020. The fiscal year 21 tentative budget pre-pandemic was 261.7 million, and the final approved and submitted to the state budget was 228.6 million, or 33.1 million less than the tentative pre-pandemic number, where we did a lot of cost containment measure to make sure that we can sustain the service. Next slide, please. RTC was able to lower capital expenses from 132.1 million to 91.5 million, or about 40.6 million, by delaying capital projects by a year or so, and some of them we delayed them indefinitely until we see the funding level come back to the norm. Next slide, please. Now we have some good news to share to the group. I know it's everything there is a little bit all on the downside, but the National Transit Database recently released their most current data, which ranks the RTC transit system as the most cost-efficient bus-only system among the top 50 transit agencies. This means that the RTC uses fewer tax dollars per transit ride and operates at an overall lower cost per trip than any other agency in the NTD Top 50 for bus mode only. Since the NTD began publishing this report in 2012, the RTC received this honor for 7 out of the 8 years. Just a few points of reference. This, when we say bus-only mode, this is pertaining to fixed route. Our operating cost per passenger for fixed route for fiscal year 2019, it's $2.74, as compared to San Francisco Muni, which is the second among the top 50 at $3.19. City and County of Honolulu at $3.34. While comparing this to our neighboring states in the top 50, of course, we have San Francisco Muni at $3.19, San Diego MTS at $3.34, Valley Metro in Phoenix, $4.59, UTA or Utah Transit Authority at $7.46, and Santa Clara Valley in California at $9.72 per ride or trip. So this concludes my prepared presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
This is Dan Hyde. I just got 2 quick questions for you. Sherwin, could you tell me as a percentage what the salaries are, the total budget currently?
Can you repeat that again, Dan?
Salaries as a percent of your budget. What is the current percentage in relation to your total budget?
Typically, our salaries and benefits, it hovers around. Sorry about that.
I didn't hear you.
No, I got distracted. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
It hovers around 4 to 6% of our total budget.
Okay. Currently, would you say it's closer to 4 or 6%?
I'll double check with that one and get back to you then.
And the only other question I have is there an updated cost per ride for the paratransit that is different than what we currently have?
Sorry, I'm getting bad reception.
The RTC paratransit cost per ride, could you give me an update on what that cost is currently?
The most recent data that we have in 2019, the cost per ride that we have calculated, it's about $33 per ride.
That's about 2 years old. You don't have any current information?
We are working on the most current information, and we should give that to you as soon as we have it finalized.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it.
Yes, and I'll make sure that I'll send those on our next meeting.
Thank you.
Sherwin, Betty Logan for the record.
Yes.
I know in your report that you mentioned that there's a reduced use of the fixed route in general, but do you have any data on the paratransit use since the pandemic? And how much has it been reduced, and how much in percentage?
We have some data, Beth. Unfortunately, I don't have it handy with me right now on the number of rides, but we also have some significant decline in the number of rides with paratransit and also the cost associated with that. We will provide that information to you as well. So I have 3 on my list right now.
Okay, thank you, Sherwin.
Madam Chair, Dan Howland,
Yes,
for the record, to answer Beth's question, just after the next presentation, I'll have a little bit of information that I may answer Beth's question in the last presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Sherwin, this is Jean, and I have just a clarification question and then a question. Clarification, is your fiscal year July to June?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, so the first quarter was July to through September. Okay, yes. My other question is about 3 slides back or so, you were talking about the budget, and there was a big part that was kind of dark blue, and then at the bottom there was like pink lines and maybe yellow lines or white lines or something. I was just wondering what those lines all meant.
Oh, if we can go back to those slides, please. One more. Okay. So these slides, yes, the light blue all the way in the bottom, it's our salaries and wages. And then I think this pink, this is pink, it's our employee benefits. And then the big blue line is our services, where we pay our contractors, operators, mechanics, fuel, security. This is the big box over here. The transfer, which is the purple on top, we transfer money for our admin. So for support, for human resource, for finance, and for management support. So those are the transfers there.
Okay, good. That makes, I figured that's what it was, but we never heard about it, so I wanted to check.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We wanted to present this holistic in terms of the total cost and what we have done to be sustainable as an agency. And I think one thing I've noted in our previous presentation, with this budget for 2021, we did not cut our core or our ADA paratransit budget. So even though the rides is not there, we did not cut any budget for ADA service. And that's what we're trending as well in our fiscal year 2022. We're looking at no cuts for our ADA for paratransit service.
Great. Well, thank you. And I just noticed at the very bottom there, it explains what those colors were, but I used a magnifier and didn't see it. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Happy to assist.
Are there any other questions for Sherwin? Okay, well, thank you very much. We appreciate it. We'll hear from you again soon, I'm sure.
Definitely, Madam Chair. I'll be happy to present.
Thank you. Number 8 on our agenda is an update on the Maryland Parkway. On Maryland Parkway bus rapid transit project, and that's going to be given by Bridge Galati. So, Bridge, are you ready?
Thank you and good afternoon, Madam Chair and the members of the committee. Bridge Galati, Director of Capital Projects for the record. Can you hear me okay?
Bridge, this is Reagan Lively for the record. We can barely hear you. If you could move closer to your microphone, that would be great.
Reagan, can you hear me clearly?
There, now we can hear you clearly.
Okay. Thank you and good afternoon, Madam Chair and the members of the committee. Bridge Galati, Director of Capital Projects for the record. We're just starting design on the Maryland Parkway Bus Rapid Transit project, and it's my pleasure to provide an update to the Transportation Access Advisory Committee. Next slide, please. I'll begin with the scope of the project. The proposed Maryland Parkway BRT will replace the existing Route 109. The new BRT route, which is planned to extend from McCarran International Airport in the south to the Las Vegas Medical District in the city of Las Vegas in the north, is approximately 8.4 miles in length. The BRT route is proposed to have 44 transit station locations and is planned to be funded by the Federal Transit Administration grant funds. Next slide, please. Thank you. The BRT is being designed to operate in exclusive outside lanes for majority of the route. Please note that cars turning right in or out of the driveways and at the intersection will also be allowed to use these exclusive bus lanes. To improve safety, raised medians will be constructed in segments where they're currently non-existent. Environmentally friendly median treatments, such as artificial desert plants, will be installed in the medians for aesthetic treatment. Next slide, please. The pavement will be repurposed for the exclusive bus lanes. Bike and pedestrian safety improvements would include separate bike lanes, replacing or repairing sidewalk panels as needed, and widening sidewalks where right-of-way is available. Americans with Disabilities Act upgrades would include sidewalk ramp reconstruction, ensuring that the path from the cross street to the transit shelters is clear of obstructions, accessibility around the transit shelters, providing adequate traffic signal pole clearance, and also ensuring that the height and the reach of push buttons are compliant with the ADA Act. Next slide, please. Through a rigorous procurement process, we've selected GCW as the prime design consultant for the project. GCW has a team of sub-consultants for various aspects of the design as noted on the slide. And I'm proud to note that of the total 16 local firms, 7 are disadvantaged business enterprise or small business enterprise, and will meet the 6.6% goals set by the RTC. Next slide, please. Now I'll elaborate on the overall project schedule. The 30% design is currently in progress and is expected to be complete by July of this year. 60%, 90%, and final 100% design are anticipated to be complete by February, July, and October of next year, 2022, respectively. We are also planning to bring a contractor on board in June of this year to start the pre-construction activities. Once we have the final design, we'll plan to begin construction at the end of 2022. We estimate the construction to last approximately 2 years and to have the project ready for operations at the end of year 2024. Next slide, please. So to summarize the next steps, the designer is currently in the field data collection and processing phase. And we anticipate the preliminary or 30% design to be complete by July of this year. We'd like to come back to this committee to provide you with an update in July and get your comments and feedback to incorporate in the design. Overall public outreach will also begin after the 30% design is complete. We anticipate the construction activities to begin at the end of 2022 and complete at the end of 2024. Next slide, please. This concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions you may have.
Madam Chair, this is Beth Ilagan for the record. Bridge, I have a question. So what is the budget for this project, in particular the BRT? What is the total amount of budget allotted?
A great question. With respect to cost, we're trying to present to the FTA as a small starts, which is under $300 million.
I see. Okay.
And that is the total soup to nuts cost, including design, construction, third-party inspections, services, permit fees, everything you can imagine. We're trying to cap that at $300 million.
Okay, thank you, Bridge.
You're welcome.
Are there other questions for Bridge? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Bridge. We appreciate this, and we look forward to seeing you in July so that we can see updated stuff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Same here.
Thank you. All right. Number 8 on our agenda. Let me just make sure I'm heard. No. Number 9 on the agenda is actually a presentation from the RTC staff on COVID-19 and paratransit, COVID-19 transit data, and that's going to be given by Dan Howland. So Dan, if you were ready.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. Dan Howland, Director of Paratransit and Specialized Services for the record. Today, I'll be presenting on paratransit COVID impact and response. Next slide, please. So up first is paratransit ridership. As you can see, our paratransit average trips per day. What I'm going to do here is go over 2019 and 2020 averages, and that'll be in bar graph form. And you see there in 2019 in the blue, we had 3,418 paratransit trips per day. That's accounting for 7 days a week. And then in 2020, that dipped to 1,759. So to go to the committee member's previous question after Mr. Gutierrez's presentation, since the pandemic started, March, April, we were seeing as much as up to 75% decrease in weekday demand. That decrease got less and less as we proceeded through the summer, but still was in the 50% range. Sometimes 60% range. When we hit October, we were seeing decreases of 35%. So things were improving steadily. We were seeing about a 2% increase a week. And then November, December, the holidays hit, and we normally do see a slowdown, and things did slow down. Currently, we're doing anywhere from, we're seeing about a 40 to 45% decrease in normal weekday demand. And that's just as recently as last week. So to put that in numbers, we're doing on weekday trips anywhere from 2,500 to 2,700 trips on a weekday here in January. On the right-hand side of the slide, you see average boardings per day. So that would account for PCAs and companions joining the customer. So you can see 2019, that was an average of 3,859 per day, and then dropped in 2020 to 1,924. Next slide, please. So this is a really important slide because this is paratransit solo trips. We're a shared ride service, but as you can see from the blue 2019, 42% of our trips are solo trips, meaning an ambulatory or somebody in a mobility device is taking a solo trip origin to destination. And it's just the nature of our business. But we are a shared ride service. But as a result of the pandemic and the decreases that we saw as a result of ridership, people not going out as much, coupled with the RTC and our contractor, paratransit contractor MV's efforts to schedule trips so that there would be less people on the bus for the purposes of safety and social distancing, that number has increased to 70% for solo trips. So that's, hats off to the RTC, MV for their efforts in doing that scheduling. So we do have a social distancing program on the buses, and we account for up to 3 ambulatory being 6 feet apart, along with 1 mobility device. And that 6 feet apart includes the driver, but we rarely have to do that. So next slide, please. Next slide.
1 second, Dan. This is Reagan Lively, and we're experiencing technical difficulties.
Okay, thank you, Reagan. So, thank you. Moving on to senior transportation, average boardings per month. So this is your Silver Star or your shopping cart routes, and then your flexible demand response. So in 2019, you can see average boardings per month were 4,603, and that decreased about 800 to 3,819 in 2020. So obviously people still going out and doing the grocery shopping, etc., for the senior transportation services that we provide. Next slide, please. So this will give you an indication due to the pandemic and the decrease in demand, average vehicles utilized per weekday. You see there for paratransit in 2019, we were averaging 279 vehicles a day, and that per weekday, that is. And then in 2020, it reduced to 193. For Silver Star, which is hasn't seen as big a decrease as paratransit, we went from 9 vehicles in 2019 to 7 in 2020. And then for the flexible demand response, they were using 3 on average a weekday in 2019, and that's gone down to 2 in 2020. Next slide. Another very important slide with respect to vehicle disinfecting on the paratransit fleet. MV and Silver State using the HALT and Oxyver disinfectant spray, disinfecting the buses every night since March. You can see we started, it was 84%, and it steadily rose there, and it's been in the 90s ever since, except for November, dipped 89. But to the very right, the gold bar, you see 92% average. And you might say, well, why isn't that 100%? Well, not all the vehicles are in the yard at the time of the disinfecting at night. They're still out on route. And then you've also got vehicles that are out of service for preventative maintenance or maintenance. But all vehicles that pull out the next morning for service had been through the normal cleaning protocol that our paratransit contractor conducts, MV Transportation, as well as have been received the Halt or Oxyver disinfectant spray. So just another level of protection that the RTC and our contractors are providing to our customers nightly. Next slide, please. Drivers, obviously an integral part of delivering this service. Paratransit complement in 2019 was 551 active drivers. As you can see in 2020, due to the decrease in demand, our contractor reduced that to 390 active drivers with voluntary layoffs. I can tell you that right now, that number is just over 400 active drivers. And they have, MV Paratransit has started some small driver refresher training classes for some of those voluntary layoffs that they're bringing back. And that's due to normal attrition. We still, with an active workforce of 390, our contractor still deals with daily call-offs due to illness, handling vacations, and normal attrition, people finding other jobs or other circumstances. And as a result, in order for us to continue to meet demand, they have just recently started their first classes of driver training and driver refresher training for some of those voluntary layoffs that they're bringing back. So, and obviously with the vaccine coming out, we're obviously optimistic that over the coming months that service demand may increase. Next slide. And this is about our call centers. So the para average call volume per weekday, as you can see in 2019, we were receiving 1,578 calls on average per weekday from our paratransit customers to book their rides. And then on 2020, you can see that reduced to 930 calls. So our call center staff has been doing a fantastic job providing this service and booking the trips for our customers. Hats off to them, and appreciate all the hard work they have done. And they are keeping very busy with calls for booking trips and comments, along with the other services that we provide in senior transportation and veteran services. And next slide, please. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Dan, this is Betty Logan for the record. Correct me if I misunderstood. Okay, because according to the report of Mr. Gutierrez, the budget for paratransit was not reduced. It's still the same. But then at the same time, we have less ridership, and there's also some voluntary layoffs. So does this mean that we have leftover money from the budget? And what happens to that? Is that carried over for the next year, or?
Yeah, Hi, this is Dan. In response to that, Beth, I'll get an answer for you on that. What you just said is very logical and makes sense. So yes, obviously with the decrease in demand, our budget, we're not spending as much on operations, but you also have to consider, and that's why I'll have to get back to you. We've had to step up our efforts from a safety standpoint. We've had to reduce our productivity for social distancing and safety. So it hasn't been as much as you may think. So, but it's an excellent question, and your logic makes perfect sense. And I will follow up with you on that.
Thank you, Dan. Well, I know because of the pandemic, we have additional expenses, and so in spite of the less ridership and less cost and less demand, I'm sure there's other expenses that we could use it for. But thank you so much, Dan.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Dan about the paratransit data? Okay. Hearing none, thank you very much, Dan. That was real interesting.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And now we are at item 10 of the agenda, which is public comment, our second session of public comment. And this can be a comment addressing any RTC or transit issue. Again, people should have written in or gone on the website and made their comments. And Reagan, have any comments been submitted to you?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Reagan Lively again for the record. There are no public comments at this time. Madam Chair, that concludes the public comments received.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments from members of the board that would like to say something about whatever, transit or anything? Yes, Beth.
Betty Logan for the record. I just wanted to know, is the RTC in any way included in the the train project, the speed train project from Southern California to Las Vegas?
Madam Chair, Dan Howland for the record, to answer Beth's question. That is a separate entity that is undertaking that project.
I see.
But if there's any consultation or anything or any advice they're looking for from us, we can look into that and see. But it's my understanding that's a separate entity that is doing that project.
Thank you, Dan.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Now, this is Dan Hyde. Just a quick question. And the next meeting in March is what date?
Madam Chair, Dan Howland for the record. It's typically the fourth Wednesday of the month, and pulling up calendar here.
Okay. March 20. I don't have my calendar. Oops.
Madam Chair, Reagan Lively again for the record. On our calendar, the next TAAC meeting will be held on Wednesday, March 24th.
24th. Thank you. The only other comment I wanted to make is I want to congratulate the RTC staff for remarkable detail and information that is very useful for not only the committee members of the people if they are listening. This information is vitally important to know and to prove how efficient the RTC paratransit system is operating, not only a paratransit, but the fixed route system. And where there are flaws, they are taking good action and very good planning action to resolve whatever issues develop. So there is no question in my mind as to why the RTC of Southern Nevada is rated #1. And they set an exemplary example that other entities should be following. I think it is a credit to you, Dan, and the staff that you have, and certainly MJ Maynard and everybody that represents the RTC. And I'm just very thankful to be a part of the TAAC committee to witness this kind of excellence. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Madam Chair.
Yes. Before just a second, Dan, I want to thank you for saying that because I think it really is very true and represents the way we all feel. It's a pleasure and something to be proud of to be working with RTC. So, Raymond.
During the budget presentation, we heard how different monies can be spent on some things, but not other things. Is there any way we can get a breakdown on what dollars can be spent on what and what dollars can't be spent on what? I know for operations, certain pots of money can be included for operations, but then only certain pots of money can be used for purchases of new vehicles and the like.
Madam Chair, Dan Howland for the record.
Yes.
We can certainly look into that, but I know Mr. Gutierrez is still on the line. I can defer to him, but he may still simply want to follow up on that question as well.
Yes,
Sure.
Great question. Thank you, Dan. Great question, Mr. Fletcher. So what I'm going to do is show a presentation on all the like our funding sources and what those can be used for on the next meeting, if that's okay with you.
Certainly, and I appreciate that, Sherwin, and hopefully you have an opportunity to do that same presentation at the RTC commission meeting. You know, unfortunately, there are people out in the public that think that just because the RTC gets a amount of money from the federal government or from a certain funding source, that it can be used to expand services or fund certain routes or create certain routes, when in reality that funding can't be used for anything operationally. So it would be, you know, it would be good for our committee, but as a whole for the community, I think it would be a great education opportunity for those that think that you can just wave a magic wand over a pot of money and poof, expand the service.
Yes, thank you very much for your comment, Mr. Fletcher. And like I said, we typically present that during our budget presentation to the board. I'll be more than happy to present it to the committee on the next meeting, showing the different sources and uses and limitation on some of those funds.
Great.
And then, Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes.
I would like to respond to one question from Dan, so I don't have to come back on the next meeting for this one. So the percentage of salary and benefits, so I looked at it. I know it's somewhere there, but I apologize. It's a 5.8%, Dan. 5.8% of our total expenses goes to salaries and benefits.
Thank you so much for the update. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I only owe you one, and then just wanted to make sure with Miss Beth Ilagan, did Mr. Dan's presentation suffice your question?
Yes, and thank you.
Okay.
And Beth, did Dan's presentation answer the questions you had?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Then are there any other questions from or comments from the board, from the committee rather? Okay, hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Dan Hyde, so moved.
We stand adjourned. Thank you all so much. We will see you on March 24th at 1:30.
Thank you.